All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Demand Stacking Podcast. My name is Scott Gelber, and I'm here alongside my co host, Brian Koffler. And on today's episode, we'll be chatting with Allison Schoner, who is currently the Director of Digital Marketing at Evident ID. And what we'll be discussing is how to build a scrappy demand generation team. So, right now, getting headcount for full time hires is not the easiest. So, I'm excited to hear Allison's thoughts on creative ways to get the resourcing you need to hit your targets when budgets are getting tighter for SaaS companies. Just a little background on Allison. She's worked at multiple fast growing SaaS companies such as Diligent Corporation, CoreView, and Security Scorecard. And she's been working in demand gen for SaaS startups for over 10 years. Allison, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott and Brian.
Of course. So I guess just to kick it off, I'm curious, when you started in new roles as a demand gen leader, what are some of the first things you're looking to tackle? Just walk us through some of your thought process, like once you started in a new role.
Yeah. First thing, it's always digging into the data. There's always just a ton to figure out and learn on your own time. And I find the quickest route to get there is just digging in, finding out what's there, what's not, and deducing that analysis off of what you find. Second would be around building really strong relationships. I find the most valuable input I get are from my allies, which can be team members, stakeholders, but just having a real live talking piece in terms of your thoughts and your ideas, I think are just essential when you're first coming on board, and then also just continuing your career. Third is always to start small. I've got a lot of ideas, and when you first join, it's more about condensing those ideas to 3 core projects, objectives, campaigns. Learn quickly around them, and then move on to your overall long-term strategy. And then the fourth would be after all the lessons you can learn in that short 90-day period of time, that's when you start building out this super comprehensive plan for long-term success, and then make sure you align that with stakeholders.
Got it.
Allison, when you think about the 90-day plan or 90-day kind of entry plan and then diving really in after the 90 days after the learnings, how do you think about your team and team setup as kind of part of that? Or how does that factor into that?
Yeah. When I look at this at like a very startup level, it has to be a mix. I know I'm not going to get my dream team for a long period of time. And I rely very heavily on agencies. That's today, that's been in the past. And so when I look at my team dynamic, generally my first hire in-house, I want someone that can be trusted with a lot of projects. So they can write the content for the email, they can run the ads, they can have thoughts around direct mail, and then they have this desire or this need to specialize in an area. So if they say, hey, I really am interested in learning more about product marketing, and we don't have that role 100% today, I let them lean all the way into that type of project. Second of all, it's looking at your channels. So there's obviously always going to be essential demand gen channels. Like you need organic, you need paid. And so looking at where the in-house team is versus essential opportunities, I look at where those gaps are. If someone is not an organic expert, I rely now on an agency to help with that relationship. For agencies, I allow them to be part of the team for better or for worse. So that means they are super involved in all the projects. They know exactly what's going on with the company. They have an understanding about the data and how they've affected that data. And so it's really having this, although they're external, they're definitely part of the family is what I tell them. And they're on the hook for those numbers as well.
Do you give them, like, are you the one servicing that data, or are you giving them access to the CRM? Like, how do you kind of make that work?
I don't give them access to the CRM just for security reasons. They do have access to whatever their own platforms are. So for Google Ads, they obviously have access to the ad platform. For analytics, they have access to that. It's really on me, and I make it a weekly objective to then bubble up whatever sort of data comes out of that. So, hey, guys, we closed this XYZ deal from organic, and I celebrate with that agency because that's really their win as well. It's on my head, but it's our win. and they should be just as enthusiastic and engaged as my teammates would be.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're providing the context for them.
Yeah, and the excitement.
I was just going to ask, with the results and with the goals,
Mm-hmm.
do you prioritize the initiatives or the functions of the agency, or even the full-time hires at the beginning, or do you let them tell you, based on like hitting certain results, what they think that they should do first? And I guess that applies to both like in-house people that when you start and also agencies.
Yeah, I have a stricter 90-day policy for most people, whether that be agency or in-house. And so tend to set the objective for the first 90 days. I've been lucky so far in my career where people are just as eager, or they define their KPIs moving forward in terms of, this is what I want to accomplish. This is where I think we can continue to succeed in. And so I've gotten lucky in that, but I've definitely been the first 90 days is set by me, the pace of it, and they tend to match it for the remaining time.
Yeah, I think it's super important that there's some visibility into maybe getting into the CRM or just servicing that data. Because I think a lot of times the issue I've run into is the agency doesn't have full context around like, what are the leads coming in? Are they progressing down the funnel? Are they the right leads we want to be getting? And without that, it's like, especially for B2B companies, it's almost impossible for them to be successful unless they like can really be a part of that and measure the quality as well.
Yeah. And I don't negate ever that unqualified bucket. It's always like, what's our ICP? What are we getting today? And what is just almost junk, and making sure that we know where those pages are and how to better that. So 100%. It's the full funnel. It's the full gambit.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess I think something interesting that I've seen you do is kind of to your point is look for agency help, maybe in a more diverse way than I've seen a lot of other startup leaders do. Can you talk to us a little bit more about like your agency stack? Like, how did you decide which agencies to, prioritize? Like, which channels did you prioritize first? How did you find them? Is there any common traits with some of the more successful agencies you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely. So generally when I prioritize agencies, it's finding that skill gap that I have in-house versus how many hours someone is able and willing to work on a particular task, and then mapping it out from there. Generally, I try to look 6 months down the road for an agency. I never want them to be a quick fix. I want them to be a long-term fix, and seeing how I can get the most value from them, not just for that 3-month period, but potentially 6, 9, 12, 2 years, what have you. And so when I find an agency, I've been, again, very lucky. It's been mostly through word of mouth. And so, my network is, I trust a few people in my network. And if they have a good positive experience with an agency, I want to grab them away from them and woo them and make sure that I also have them in my tech stack. Obviously, if word of mouth, I'm not finding anything, then it's obviously, a website search, a Google search. In terms of like long-term success with those agencies that I find on the web, it takes me, there's a layer of not trusting them yet, just because I don't know them. They don't have that word of mouth factor where if my colleague says, hey, I've had a great experience with XYZ company, I'm more likely to trust them immediately. It's definitely a much shorter leash for those agencies that I find on the website. What I find to be the most successful agency relationships are people that think like me in terms of relationship building, in terms of agencies. So like, I value my agency relationships because I think they're true partnerships. I think we both learn from each other. I'm the expert in the relationship for the company, where we're going, that foundation. They should be that expert in the decision making of that certain field. That, to me, they are my expert information. If I have an idea and they said that is an awful idea. They need to let me know that. I am paying their bills, but like they are the agency, the expert in that field. And so you should be telling me yes or no in terms of my ideas. And, honestly, I care a lot about their success too. Like, it's not just a one off relationship. Like, it's a forever thing with me. I'll keep in contact with them. I'm knowing their kids' names. It's not forever, it is forever. But also with that, it's like on my side of the relationship, it's a lot of sharing. So they're not privy to those internal meetings. I have to tell them where we're going as a company. And I also have to care about their success as an individual and as a company. Because if you're not having that two-way street, then it's not going to be a valuable relationship for both sides.
Now, how do you balance that, Allison, with hiring a team full?
Yeah, I think the dynamic changes, eventually. If the company is going to expand and get to the next series, that relationship is changing. That's 100% guaranteed. I think in the demand gen world, no one's staying at their job for 50 years. So it might be a reduction in the agency. It might be a see you later, but there will be another conversation. Though I will work at another company. That's the value. You're looking at the long-term strategy. This is my agency for my career. This is not, and although a company might expand in their series or they're investing more in marketing and that might look like a different marketing team, it's certainly not, it's just an adjustment. It's not goodbye forever.
It's interesting you look at it that way because like we're an agency, and I think a lot of people think of us as a short-term relationship, right? And very much it being like, hey, we're going to give you a shot for 3 months, and if you don't perform, you're out. Or we're going to use this as a stopgap before we make the full-time hire. So it's funny to hear you say that, because it's actually like, that's not, I think most people don't think of it that way. I think they think of it as a short-term thing. And the approach that you have, I think, probably leans towards better results with them rather than the short-term approach.
And I think that's where you get into like the relationship bit of it, where I really feel like I know a lot of my agency's personal lives. I know if they're getting married, when they're getting married, where they're getting married. And it's really an extension of a team. I would care that much about someone that's internal. And so if you're my external agency, I care about the personal things that are going on in your life. I care that you're sick, but I also care that you're driving those results. And I think if you don't marry those two at this stage of series, then you got to both be passionate about each other in some aspect. They also have to want to see me win. And, I think having that other factor of that winning factor, I've seen great results. I've seen people that want to hustle, they work extra hours, they do extra things for me. And it's not because I'm necessarily paying them. I think it's actually because I do care.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. I think after this episode, you're gonna get a ton of outreach from agencies who want to work with you, because I think most clients do not think of it that way.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I like to keep my group small. So
you got to get in, and then once you're in, it's a good
once you're
relationship.
in, you're good.
Allison, what do you see from the agency side of you, or like the agencies that you work with, that makes them good to work with?
So what I look for in an agency is someone that's going to say no, is going to push back, is going to be that industry expert, and have confidence in their conviction as well, and feel confident in our relationship that this is the right direction for not only their agency, but also for my company. Second of all, beyond industry knowledge, they have to have some sort of that spark, that willingness to meet me halfway and care about my objectives. Like I'm their only client. I want them to say, hey, were we able to meet our meetings? What's our pipeline goal if I'm not providing that? And I want them to be just as engaged as any sort of teammate and curious.
Yeah, proactivity is important, right? Like, not you having to bug them to do things or service things, but them actually coming to you and being like, hey, what's going on with this? Why have you not sent me the
Right.
copy yet? Like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Does that make
exactly.
sense? And then just a question, I'm curious, like, let's say, for example, you're running a Google Ads campaign and you go to your Google Ads agency and you're like, hey, I want to do this campaign, these keywords, this type of matching. Are you, if they come to you and say like, hey, I think that's wrong, are you like, okay, you make the call, or are you like, no, I think it's like super important that we do it this way? How do you
Yeah.
kind of think about that?
It's more of I rationalize it. If this is something that I feel really strongly about, or it's coming from an executive, or it's coming from a higher power saying like, hey, I want to test this, then that is the rationale that I'll provide, saying, hey, we're seeing this competitor, for example, come up. The executive team is curious to know about, the results from running this campaign and targeting this audience. I don't think my paid agency would say, absolutely not. That's a ridiculous request. I think it's making sure that they understand where the initiative is coming from, and then putting in the mind frame that this is a test if they do feel like that's the wrong direction, and then they can back that test up with hard data saying, hey, we got 0 results. I told you this was a bad decision, but at least we have 3 weeks of knowledge and we won't repeat it. But in addition, the next addition to that addition is that they generally will come back with a better suggestion. So if I'm looking to target dog sweaters, they will say, you know what, dog sweaters, such a hard market. You're going to get slaughtered out there. You know what you should be putting your ads against? Dog sweaters for 3-legged dogs. Well, I certainly know a buyer there. And, that would be a suggestion that would actually come from the agency.
Brian, Allison has a 3-legged dog. That's what she's referring to.
And I do look at that at Google.
I've never gotten that recommendation, Allison, or I've never made that recommendation to a client that that's what they should be bidding on, but maybe we should.
Yeah, just because, we don't have to have this in the podcast, because I don't know if Jason would want to be referenced, but like there was a term that I felt very passionate about, and Jason was like, no, you're going to get slaughtered out there. This is actually the better term that you should be bidding on. And it was a slight variation, but like he did the keyword research and then he made that educated decision for me. And it wasn't coming from an executive. It was just coming from me. And that's what we did. And so like,
yeah,
I think
that makes total. Sorry, Scott.
I was gonna say, I think that's right. Right, is like, I think we try to do that too. Like, if we see something that we think is not the best decision, we try to voice our opinions. But to your point, at the end of the day, if they're like, look, this is important to do for whatever reason, maybe like it's like strategically we want to test this messaging.
Right.
Then you kind of gotta say yes, right, and do it. But yeah, I think it's important always just to like not just be a yes person, and like at least voice why you think it's a bad idea for their interest, right? To make sure that they're making the best decisions and not wasting money.
Yeah, and it's not a told you so factor as well. It's 2 educated people coming to a meeting with their best guesses of what the most ideal situation can be. And everyone can have conflict in that. At the end of the day, it is on the client side to have the final word and the final say. But if you're starting to see results and they're awful, that is on the agency side to say, hey, these are the facts. If you want to keep going down this hole and spending X amount of money, this is what's going to look like in 3 months' time. You're going to waste whatever, $10K on this phrase, on this campaign. I highly suggest you not do that. I don't know how someone can argue based on just data.
Yeah. I think actually now that you're saying that, I think there's some value there's some value in just like pointing out things that are not going well. Yeah. I think sometimes people, if we point out like, hey, you've been doing this on Google Ads and you're wasting a ton of money, we should stop it. I think sometimes people appreciate that maybe even more than like something good happening, which is funny.
Yeah, that's knowledge. That's showing your industry advantage, saying like, hey, I know my craft. and this is what you're doing wrong, and that's okay because we're here to help.
Cool. Just switching gears a bit, Allison. What do you think makes a good demand gen leader? In-house or agency? I know it's a broad question, but like, what are some of the characteristics of the people that you have worked with or like working with that you are like, oh, they're really good at their role or they make our company better?
Yeah. I think there's one trait that's really sticking on my mind right now, and it's persevering. And I think that's a trait that extends beyond their professional capacity. And to have perseverance in this role, I think is essential, way more than analytics, way more than relationship building. And that's because there is a lot, a lot, a lot of failure. And when a campaign is not going your way and you are getting pinged by your executives, you're getting pinged by your sales team saying, hey, I thought this was going to produce X, why not? Now you're on the hook. You've got to now persevere through all of that corporate lingo and making sure that you're talking to the right people and communicating the right way. But you also have to be the one now to dig into that data and figure out why this machine is not working. That to me is like the number one. You've just got to sift through the mud, keep your head down, keep going strong, and just figure it out. Second, I think most like generically, you have to be detailed oriented. There's a lot of data decisions that are made throughout demand gen. It's a lot of spreadsheets, dare I say more than the finance bros out there. And you've got to really dig into those nuanced data points and figure out why did X work and why didn't Y work, and make a real succinct, deduced decision based on those really, really small data points in some matters. And I guess like third, it would just be like curiosity. You have to wonder how to improve a campaign. It could be a really long evergreen campaign that you've been running for a year. All of a sudden it tanks. You got to figure out what's changed in the market and how do I make that better? In demand gen, we have tons of just new software updates, new acronyms, just new. And you've got to be curious about finding out what they are and how you can leverage that in your toolkit, and making sure that it somehow all relates to what your customer is motivated by.
Yeah, it always makes me laugh when somebody says, oh, I thought this would work, or why isn't this working? I'm like, yeah, me too. That's why we did it. Like, I think it's always funny. Maybe funny is not the right word, but humorous when it's usually other departments are like shocked or surprised when things aren't always working perfectly. And sometimes it seems like there's just internal education needed, that we try a lot of things that don't work. Like, they may not see that, but Dimension people see that all the time. It's like such not a big deal.
Yeah. I mean,
but
failure is
yeah.
the job.
Yeah, but sometimes it always felt like to me like people just expected things to work like the first time, and it's like, no, you just don't see like 90% of this.
Yeah. It's like 99% failure.
And from an agency side, it's even more kind of exemplified because we share every single result, and most agencies I think do, with campaigns with the clients.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do with expectation, has to do with like communicating that up front, and internally and externally educating on what success is and how to get there.
And also not being afraid of it. I spent a lot of time being afraid of the failures, and that is the job. If you want that job, that's the job. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a one-to-one result.
The way you phrased it was like exactly how it's phrased all the time, which is like, oh, why didn't this work? Or, oh, I thought this would work. And it's like, yeah, so did we. So did we. That's why we spent time doing it.
Yeah, that's why I invested my money on it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all good advice. And also just like not being scared of the failure or the first failure is super important for anyone who's trying to break into or already in demand gen.
Yeah.
I think that first point's really interesting about being willing to dig yourself out of the dirt. It's true. Like it's just like an up and down roller coaster that you have to like roll with the punches. Like even if you're doing really good work and results are going up, the second something goes a little bit down, even if it's like 3 times more than what you were doing 6 months ago, it's a problem for some reason.
Mhm.
And it's really a never ending cycle of some ups, some downs, and it's like it's every week, right? And even if like 9 things are working perfectly, but one is missing, then you have to go and explain why that one thing didn't work and what you're doing to fix it. And it's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard, but you kind of, I think to your point, like having the mindset of like, hey, this is the game I'm playing, and trying to enjoy that. That is super important. Cool. So I guess sticking on this topic, I'm curious, just like, what are some mistakes that you've made in your demand gen career that you would recommend others avoid?
yeah. I thought about this one a lot because at first I was looking for a specific example, and the only thing that came to mind was more of a personality change that's happened, and that's being too hard on myself when something didn't go according to plan. I'm someone that likes to dot all my I's, cross all my T's, make sure everyone has their view or their opinion about a certain type of campaign and just hearing everyone's voice. And then you run it, and then it's just a goose egg. Like, campaigns are not generating, there's no click through rate, it's any sort of metric, and it's just flatlined. Um, and now, with like a few more years underneath my belt, I've realized that those campaigns have actually been the most beneficial in terms of my professional development, because you tend to be on the ropes of the ring, just to use a sports reference, and you think of something just totally out of left field. You're looking at the numbers a different way, and you just have a eureka moment, and it all just kind of clicks. And without those failures or without having those zeros, I don't know if I would have learned as much as I have having successful running campaigns consistently. And I think you just have to be really at your wits' end to find the real value or get real insight into your career about what you want to do next. And so it's really just like not being too hard for yourself, going with the motion and trusting your gut. You'll get there eventually.
I think you answered this, Allison, but our last question was going to be, what advice would you give for somebody either trying to move into demand gen or move up in a demand gen career?
Yeah.
Like, what, somebody asked you, like, what would be the 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would give?
Yeah. I It would be focus on failing forward. We've discussed this a lot on this podcast, but like, failing is the job. So as long as you're failing forward, you're learning something, you get to now control that narrative versus someone else interpreting those results in the way that they see it. I think demand gen experts, professionals, they see failure as a lesson. I think sometimes executives that are not in a marketing role will see that failure as failure and not taking that lesson component out of it. And they're just seeing it as money wasted, or the messaging is all wrong. And it could be all those factors. But in reality, it's learning the lesson, figuring out what that lesson is, and then making sure that you adjust it for version B of it.
Yeah, I think the failure piece is like, it is genuinely a learning experience. Like,
Yeah.
because you learn what doesn't work, and you learn things you've done with campaigns that like you wouldn't have realized that it was the wrong approach until you did it and saw it through. So it actually it does genuinely help you a lot as you progress, because you then don't make those mistakes and you learn them the hard way. I
Mhm.
think the other thing is, I think a big part of being a demand gen leader is selling other team members on the strategy that you're doing. And I think one of the best ways to sell an idea or sell an approach is by leveraging past experience that you've had with it. So if someone says, you know, we should be bidding on more broader keywords. You can lean on your experience that, hey, I actually did that at another role, and what happened is like we got a ton of unqualified people, we spent a ton of money, and it's hard to I don't know, refute that. So I feel like the experience is a great also like leaning point for making your case on certain things, good and bad.
Yeah.
Because
'Cause
when
you've already
I
learned
haven't had that experience, like if someone's like, well, what about this? You're kind of just like making it, you're kind of making it up. You're kind of like, well, I don't think it's a good idea, and it's not a very solid place to stand. But if it's a place where you're like, well, actually, I did try that one time, and
Right.
it did terribly, and this is why. It's a
Yeah.
much more convincing place. So, and you only get that with the failure and experience.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of failure. I really am. Those are the best lessons. Best for the best.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Allison, for the time. This was really informative. And yeah, thanks for just hopping on and sharing your advice.
Thank you very much.